I've changed my mind about the Florida crash in 2024. I've not changed my mind that it's going to happen, but as I look at all the things that are taking place, and I'm seeing a lot of Florida areas already well behind the entire state, meaning they are losing price 6-7% behind what the rest of the market areas are actually doing. And folks, what I have to change my mind about is, again, not that it's happening, but what I thought would cause people to blow their prices out, bring homes down to a level of affordability so that home buyers could buy again. Now, if you talk to your average realtor, the common phrase they're going to tell you is, well, as soon as we have home prices come down, buyers are going to buy again. And ultimately, it needs to come below 7%, and that's just not the full story. Ultimately, right now, it doesn't matter if interest rates are at 6.5%. The multiple of how much it costs to buy a home really anywhere in the country is 7, 8, 9x times what a person makes every year. And that is the problem. We have historically higher cost to own a home than at any point in time in history, probably up against maybe a 60-year run of home buying in real estate because things have gotten so extraordinarily out of hand. It is not going to be a 2024 that sees the home buyers come back to the market because interest rates have fallen to 6%. In fact, if interest rates fall to 6%, that means that there is 6-7% unemployment. That means that job losses are massive. And that means that you are going to see people who own homes putting them in the market, and those that want to buy them and are going to be a very small base, even as they are today, because they're affected by those same pressures. So the reality is, and more realistically, if we go into the first 6 months of next year, you are going to see interest rates at 7.5%. We already know that our real estate market in Florida hates it. It doesn't buy at 7.5% when the average home price is $570,000 across the state of Florida, average price. Now, let me digress for a moment, because where we're seeing trouble in the market isn't where you'd expect. So let me show you what I'm talking about. These are the 3 counties in Florida. Now, aside from Jacksonville, which is not listed here in the moment, these are the 3 biggest price sliders, and some of them, they're at the top of the marketplace. Now, you're going to say, well, Jared, what is the common ground of these marketplaces that are sliding? Well, that's a great point. That teaches us a lot, doesn't it? Well, I'm going to show you. First of all, you have Sumter County, which is the Villages. You have Charlotte County, which is Punta Gorda, Port Charlotte. And then you have Sarasota. So here's what we know when we look at these areas. Number one, these are some of the oldest median age owners in the country, okay? So these are retirees in mass, okay? It's so much so that you literally only have a handful of other counties in the entire country that hold a median age above 58 years of age. Now, the 58 years of age thing also strikes me as an interesting stat, because we know this year that the median age of any available home buyer was 58 years old. Isn't that insane? So if you compare that to 1981, the average repeat buyer is someone who says, I've lived in this condo, it is too small, I'm buying something next, I'm moving up. It is historically insane that we've gone from 1981, the repeat buyers, 36 years old, then 2023, it is 58. And then you have all of these folks who go on and they pray that the real estate market sees our interest rates crash just so we can have the buyers jump back in and pay 10 times their earnings for a house? 10 times what they make every year. Okay, I make 70 grand a year. I'm going to spend 700 grand to live in Miami or wherever it is. The reality is the market is broken because it's not because everybody and their brother owns at a 3 or 4% interest rate or a huge base of people are locked in. It's broken not just from that, but because it is all these people locked in at that rate. The people that are on the outside can't afford to get in, and ultimately there's a gridlock and nothing's changing hands. But what breaks that? This, by the way, is what blew my mind, is when you look in these marketplaces, Sumter, Sarasota, and Charlotte. Let's take a look at some of the demographic data. Mortgaged home rates. Look at these. The percentage of homes in the Villages, which, by the way, has one of the fastest falling prices right now. The Villages is posting right inside of 4% down on the year, when Florida is 3% up on, or actually, I'm sorry, it's about 1.5% up. So Florida's 1.5% up, they're 4%, they're 5.5% off of where the pace is of the average Florida marketplace. Now you have the same thing in Sarasota, 48%, Charlotte, 43.31%. What does this tell us? Okay, these areas that are seeing a boom in their inventory hitting the market, and then also seeing a boom in amount of price cuts. Because look at the price cuts in these areas. Villages, 1 out of 3. Sarasota, right, approaching 1 out of 3. Sarasota arguably is doing decent, right? In some measures, not all measures, but some. And Charlotte, by the way, 31.2%. Okay, so these areas are all seeing a high percentage of price cuts, which is then translating to their home value growth going down. Because in Sumter County, 3.9, Charlotte County, 3.4, and then here in Sarasota, the least of all. But again, the point I'm making is we have all of these marketplaces where you see high cash ownership. We see these markets with high age ownership. These markets are suffering the most pressure. They have a lot of inventory coming on. And ultimately, part of this is if you look at Orlando, you look at Tampa, you look at Miami, they do not have the run up in inventory. And I'm going to show you that here in a second, whereas we're going to look deep into where these things are causing issues. How do they actually look at ground level? And again, if you're from the Villages, don't get mad at me. Okay. I know it's common. People hear what I'm saying about your market shifting, and then they act as if I devalued their house. In some way I actually cost them equity because I said it's dropping. I'm just trying to help you. Okay. So if you're in this market and think to yourself, there's a huge number of homes for sale against me, you have to plan for that. If you're planning on buying in the market, you really need to step back and determine, am I buying all cash? Am I getting a heck of a deal? Am I getting this house at a price that someone would have paid maybe 2 years ago? Let me step back for a second and establish where we are so far. Number 1, oldest median age in Florida owns these properties. Number 2, very, very low mortgage debt in these areas where inventory is off the charts, price cuts are really high, and year over year prices are falling. Next component, and this is probably true of the neighbor to the south, which is a younger crowd, arguably, but this is also being suffered the same here, which is called shadow inventory, okay? Now, Sumter County is not so much carried with shadow inventory, but you can see Sarasota and Charlotte really probably is top 1, 2, or 3, 4 counties entire state of Florida facing with shadow inventory. You say, well, Jared, what is shadow inventory? Shadow inventory is likely vacant. It means that there's it's a house that's a second home. It's another property that maybe these folks don't actually have as their primary occupancy. Okay, so why is that important? Well, when it's hard to carry those houses, you dump them. Okay, when it's a perception of the economy getting bad, you dump those houses. And ultimately, this is a commonality in these markets. Now, let me show you just how sketchy it is. Now, I want to pull up Lee County for a moment. So to give you all an idea, if you're like paying attention because chances are if you're in Sarasota or Charlotte, you know exactly where I'm going with Lee County. But Lee County is down here. Lee County is the Fort Myer, Cape Coral area, which is also being just dumped on with property. And so there's a lot of real estate activity going on there. The chart that you're seeing right here is all the active inventory going back before the pandemic. So the pandemic really shrunk the housing market in this area, which usually, Lee County again ran around 6,000 homes, and then it fell for a very long time to 75% below that, meaning very few choice in the market. If we flip on over to Sarasota, let's take a look at their inventory. And ultimately, let me tell you, this is the problem right here. Okay, when you have historic inactivity from buyers and your inventory, see the 6,000 line? This is the danger for Lee County. When you get here, it is cause and effect known that when any market across the country reaches its pre-pandemic average, in the face of interest rates and economic issues, we have major problems. Now, the fascinating thing about this particular update that I want you all to get from this is we've all been thinking in our heads that, in fact, I talked to an investor yesterday who deals with what's called wholesale properties all over Florida. This person actually is he's the top of the spear at going out and dealing with people who are, I got to sell my house fast. I got to get cash. I got to get out of it. I'm in trouble. This person, I said to him on the phone yesterday, I said, tell me this. Where are your problems coming from? What are you noticing is causing duress calls to you to get out and cash in fast to escape their house. And he said to me, in my head, I'm expecting, well, I know shadow inventory is a high percentage. I know you have the elderly that are getting apparently crushed, because if they're all selling at the same time, begs to me that it's obviously probably an economic push, because no one wants people in their house and no one lists their homes in record numbers at this time of year. It's off of the charts. I'm going to show you that here in a second. But the gentleman said to me, you know what, Jared, the reason why I'm hearing so many issues from people is because they're in trouble. They've added debt to their house. They've added they've added a home equity line of credit. They blew the thing up. He said they packed all of their credit cards onto the house. And now the burden is so big, they can't keep climbing with it. They dump the house. They get out of the house. So effectively, you got to understand this. That has been my paradigm. If you watch my channel long enough, you know that I've been saying, look, the consumer has not reduced their lifestyle. They're all borrowing in mass. We have record amount of people pulling credit to get by, and it's not going into home improvement. So when people take home equity lines of credit, but then Home Depot says they're not spending it here, that is a huge alarm bell that people are using it to just get by. They're just trying to get by. The savings are coming down across American savings. It's like very, very low. I would say it's record low, but it's coming down, which means that they're not stacking paper. They're using the credit card, and the money isn't sitting in the household. It's going back out the door. So according to this situation that we see now, you have all of these marketplaces that when they start to come back to where they are, it gets very scary. Now, what is the known measure for which, if you're in Sarasota, if you're in the Villages, if you're in Port Charlotte, what is the known measure that I can tell you, you can know your market is in seriously bad shape? Okay. Very, very simple. The most common economic measure that when I listed homes for 20 years, thousands of homeowners, even in the 2008 end of the bubble, when it started to go down, the way you could like here, put your ear to the ground and know that there was serious problems underneath is by measuring months of supply. Okay. Simply put, for all of you that are way ahead of me, economists at the armchair, like the reality is if you have a bunch of supply and it's growing by the month to the point that there's very activity of buyers is not absorbing it off, that stacks very, very high. And then ultimately the desperate motivated sellers sink the market very rapidly. Now, one of these three markets is medium to high danger. One is off the charts sketchy. Okay. So here I'm going to show you how you measure this, because ultimately this particular measurement is simply put, if you take all the active homes for sale and you look at how fast they're selling month to month, if you stop adding more homes, how long does it take you to absorb and disappear all those homes so the sellers can exit the house, especially if they're in desperation? A healthy market is measured at 4 months. 4 months is a kind of a balanced market. But in the days that we're looking, when I see markets going across Florida is 4 months plus inventory. It's 4.15, 4.16. So if you stop listing all homes in Florida, the rate of Florida selling them, 4.1. Okay. Now the rest of the U.S. economy is like 3.5, 3.6. What does that mean? It takes a seller longer to get out because we're selling or buyers are less active versus how many homes are stacking up. There's a lot of homes in the market in Florida that the U.S. economy doesn't have. So that is what creates the driver. When Florida got and I'll tell you this, the 08, 9, 10, 11, like when you look at 2009, I was selling bank-owned property. In 2009, if you looked around, the house prices were cratering. And the reason why is a motivated seller couldn't wait. He had to be next. And he did whatever he could with the price to be next. Now in Florida, prices were crashing in 2009. Guess how many months of inventory it took for a person to get that psyched up to sink prices in Florida? It was 7 to 9 months of supply. We're at 4.15, so we're half of that. But I'll tell you this, at the pace in the past 3 months that houses are increasing, it can't take very long we could be at 7 months of supply by like summer. Like in the lack of change. It doesn't cycle backwards and something shifts. But here's the crazy thing, folks. Listen to me on this. Let me go back to full screen. This is very important. You hear this. Hear me on this. What's really sketchy is Florida is now running over the number, 4+ months of supply. And we don't have the markets with all the debtors involved yet. Okay. You have an imbalance and an increased amount of inventory in the market. We're not performing, even Florida. Florida is at just over 1% of productivity in terms of year-over-year price growth. Our prices are flat. They just went up 1% this year. The rest of the country went up 3%. So we didn't perform at the same level of all the other humans in our country, right? So the point is, you look at that. You look at that localized situation. So when you're looking at a national view, you look at the state. And when you're at the state view, you look at the counties are actually kind of suffering, and you say, what's going on? And here's the point. If we already are seeing drag, major change and shift and increase of price reductions and falling price, and the markets we're seeing them in are not heavily leveraged. They're not the markets with all the mortgages. Remember what I just told you, the gentleman that said the motivated most people that are willing to give this guy an opportunity to sell and buy the house at a big discount. This is how those guys work. This analogy I told you a second ago, he's getting those opportunities with people who've added debt to their house. And these are the marketplaces with low debt already there. They were first in line. That's the part I didn't see coming. I didn't think that we would see the marketplaces with higher age, very low debt, high cash ownership. That is going to be the marketplace where the trouble arrives, and it arose first. Look at this. All right, so you have this Sarasota, Bradenton area. A lot of you, I'm glad I'm covering this because Sarasota has been requested a lot in the comments. I see you guys. But look at this. So Sarasota runs an average of 5,000 homes. So look, you're at 4,418. Look at this. The month before that, you were at 3,920. Your inventory from September to October went up like 10, 15%. Like, this is almost straight up, folks. Like, this is not a flat, gradual plane taking off. It's going up. And this is seasonally weird. Like, if you look in the history of Sarasota, I doubt everybody jumps at October as like the ideal time. Like, oh, Thanksgiving's coming. Let me go and list my house. We all know this is bizarre activity, okay? So here's the deal. Let's look at closed inventory. So if you take the over 2,400 homes that are active in Sarasota, and then you divide that by how many homes that they are closing at current pace, Sarasota is actually 4.55 months of supply. So it's, I don't know, roughly 10, 15% slower or moving in a worse direction than the state as a whole, just for Sarasota County. But let's take a look at Charlotte. Okay. This is going to be interesting for sure. Okay. Closed sales apply. So here you go. So in Charlotte County, look at this. You can see that ever since probably May 2021, Charlotte County has been cratering in sales activity. And again, some of this back here in 2021 was because you guys just didn't have the inventory. But right here, August, this was buyers like freaking out and jumping out of your market. Okay. So this means that you have a lot of sell-off that's just not taking place, because it looks like if you were coming into, 2020, your end of 2019, you were hovering, I don't know, you could say maybe 400 homes on average. And you're kind of there now, but you gotta understand, when you run 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, when you run like half a year below, like half of your sell-off is taking place. And then you, in Charlotte County, you guys have crazy high amount of builder activity. Like, I think your permits are still off the charts. Definitely your multifamily growth is ridiculous. So like, there's a lot of supply coming, and then you just had your marketplace lock up. So here we are. What do you have? 358 home sales last month. Look at your inventory. Holy cow. So you run right in here before the pandemic. I'd say you run just above 1,500. If you were to average this down back up, you're probably at like 1,600 on average. Historically, look at the pandemic. So you ran 1,600, then you floored at 500 units. So your inventory was off 65%, which probably drove your average sale price through the roof, right? So you've been on a steady climb. Let's go back 2019. You were at 286,009 in May of 2019. And now you actually have lost, because your peak was here in April 2022. You're 507,000 from 286. Ooh, it's crazy. And now you're hovering on 450. So your price is sinking. Obviously, we know year over year, you're down. Okay. This year, so just on the month of October, you're down 5.1%. I'm looking at a year span, okay? So take a look at this. Your actual closed sales was 358. Your active inventory, let's take a look. I think you're what? Wow. Okay, so 2326 divided by 350 something, 358, right? 6.49 months of supply, folks. Oh, all right. If you're on the market okay, this isn't advice. This is me, opinion. Don't mess around in this market, okay? If you got to sell in this market, don't mess around. Like, don't think, oh, maybe I can get my FOMO price. Maybe I can get what my buddy got 3 years ago. Don't play with this market at all. It's the train coming down the tracks. That's probably the worst absorption rate in an entire state of Florida, folks. Incredible. Let's take a look at the Villages before we wrap this show up. All right, Villages. I want to look at all the Villages real quick because I know a lot of folks need good information. I don't see a ton of great updates on the Villages. And this is an interesting county because, let's say Sumter County, but the Villages. Let me go. Yeah, I mean, I don't think it matters. The MSA shows really Sumter County. I mean, you guys know better than me, but that looks like your borders right there. So here's the deal. You have, going back to 2018, the active inventory runs 350, okay? Then you fell. Again, this is resale activity. The sketchy thing about the Villages, you guys, is they pumped so many permits out the last 2 years. So if you go with the VLS, the Villages has their own MLS. I shouldn't say it's their own MLS. It's not an MLS. It's an actual private party that sells their houses. And everybody's fast to come on my channel when I do these updates and say, you don't actually have all the data because VLS has more sales. Folks, I looked up the VLS yesterday and I tried to get data for you so I could do a great update. And I'm going to ask the VLS. Anybody knows the VLS? Tell them Jared Jones is coming. He's going to ask for your data. Help him out because I would love to report this for you. Okay. But the reality is MLS data has a ton of the Villages listings. I would say probably 60-40. 60% of whatever's for sale is in MLS and 40% is not in the MLS. It's in the VLS. Okay. And that's, you say, Jared, how'd you get there? I looked at the VLS. I looked at all their resale activity. I counted it up and I looked at the MLS total stock. It's a ton. There's a lot of your activity. Does it all of your activity? No, it's not. But does it give us a sample? Yeah. And it gives us a sample based on the full force of the National Association of Realtors trying to sell your house. So I'd say this is maybe even going to run better than VLS. If you take the Villages, they're currently running right at 100 resale homes a month absorption. If you take that against a running average of 400 homes, which they've been holding to for about 4 or 5 months, you have the Villages actually on just their resale inventory running at approximately the 4+, give or take, month on market, which is the same amount. Really, it's relatively the same as the state of Florida. Folks, let me tell you the rest of the story, I think, for the Villages. The reason why the Village homeowners are having problems is the same reason that a lot of the other top markets around Florida are having problems. It's not just that the supply is on the upper side, okay? So knowing that the supply itself has risen to pre-pandemic levels versus low buyer activity, but you have in this particular market the same problem you have in a lot of other markets in Florida, which is new construction commitments are really high. So there's all these new builds that are in the process, and in the Villages, it is uniquely so. Look at this. You can see that coming into 2019, they were holding 2,600 homes under permit to be constructed, okay? So if you look at what happened after that, they like doubled, tripled their historic production in a matter of a year. So, a lot of this, when you peak in the Villages, right, and you're running 4,400 homes in the pipe for new construction, and you're now starting to see 400 homes on the market, on the activity side, and you have you're like, yeah, we have 4 months of supply, but you got crazy builder competition, okay? And builders don't play around. So while your homeowner, and I don't say that from playing around, I'm saying builders don't wait. They can't wait. Their time is money. They can't keep the asset sitting there finished and not have the money come back out of it to pay all the crews to build the other houses on the same street. Plus they're paying for the interest that's on the money to build that house that's already there. But the point I'm making is you have, a maintained large supply. Now, they've slowed down. Okay. So they've cut their permit line down from about 4,100 in the towards the end of last year all the way to where they are now. But you still have like 3,000 homes that are in steady pipe that, again, 8 months from the time they finish those homes, those things are coming in, they're competing with your homeowners. And then ultimately those builders are going to do things that are dramatically creative. You know, they'll throw in furniture packages. They'll throw in closing costs. They'll throw in big package for anybody involved. Even the realtors will sometimes make $20,000, $30,000, $40,000. I've seen $100,000 commission payouts to get the realtor to drag a buyer in to get rid of one of these houses, which when you think about it, it's actually a price reduction. You know, when the builder has to give $100,000 out to sell a $350,000 house, which by the way, they don't give $100,000 on a $300,000. It's like a $900,000 house, but $100,000 on a $900,000 house is like, you know, 15%, 12% of the price. That's a reduction. Okay. So you're seeing this pressure and these headwinds in the villages, likely from a combined, the reality of much slower demand than it was before COVID, more buyer activity happening before COVID. Now you have the matter of a lot more new homes. So you got to understand, you have way more inventory than 2019. In 2019, your builder was pulling, let's look at this. Your builder was pulling 2,600 permits. You have over 1,000 more homes in the pipe right now than you did in the pre-pandemic era. And now buyers in the villages are sadly operating much, much slower. Now, this is what's going to play out for you folks in the villages, okay? You got to understand, if you're a resale home and you're competing with the new builder in that particular marketplace, that new builder is going to pull no punches in beating you out of the for sale market, okay? That's the problem, and that's what you're going to face. And that's why you're going to see possibly this active inventory in the villages go higher and higher and higher. But what is fascinating is the amount of people that are dumping their house in the market in the villages. So there's a big number of people saying, I got to go, even though I know there's a bunch of other, homes out here for sale as well. I got to get out. And that's just the way it is. That's it. That's all the update I have for you today. Thanks for watching. Drop in the comments. Tell me what you think about this below. Talk to you real soon.